Joining us now for tonight's big close-up is House Majority Whip and Minnesota Congressman Tom Emmer. Congressman, thanks for being with us tonight. I know that you've called on Governor Walz to resign. Doesn't seem like he's going to do that. A lot of us, though, would like to see him walk out of that governor's mansion in handcuffs if, in fact, he's done some of the things that look the other way on some fraud. We're not real happy about the billions in fraud in your state. What do you think is going to happen next for the governor, and what would you like to see happen?
Well, I mean, great to be with you, Tommy. And I will say, first off, you didn't play the clip of him in his first press conference announcing that we were going to fight the federal government. I mean, this guy's talking like Jefferson Davis, and I think, looking into what he's saying and what he's encouraging and how it actually has responded in attacks on Immigration and Customs Enforcement officer is entirely appropriate, Tommy. In fact, I don't know that you've reported it, but one of the officers was attacked with a snow shovel and brooms the other night by 3 illegals that the Biden administration had allowed into this country. So the federal agents are doing their job. Tim Walz and Jacob Fry. I mean, Jacob thinks he's the Gavin Newsom of the Midwest. He's not. And they both should answer for the behavior, because all you got to do is cooperate. You want the tension to be resolved. You want to de-escalate the situation. Guess what? Local law enforcement should provide a perimeter so that the Immigration and Customs Enforcement officers can do their job. The other piece of it, and by the way, if they're found guilty of that, they should be held accountable. But the other piece that you brought up is the fraud. Estimated to maybe reach $9 billion during Tim Walz's administration. We had a hearing. Jamie Comer, my friend, had a hearing on the Oversight Committee last week where 3 Minnesota legislators testified there is no doubt in their mind, based on their familiarity with the whistleblowers and all the evidence that's out there, that Tim Walz was not only aware of the fraud as it was happening, the whistleblowers told him about that fraud, and he chose to not only ignore it, but to retaliate against the whistleblowers. And I've said it before, I'll say it again. If that can be confirmed, Tim Walz should not only be resigning, he should leave the office in cuffs.
Congressman Joey Jones here. Thank you so much for coming on with us tonight. So just looking at Minnesota as a whole, but going back to this fraud, everything that's happened in the Somali community, but also Tim Walz as governor. If Tim Walz knew about this fraud, had whistleblowers knowing about this fraud for the past several years, there have been court cases already, it's already been adjudicated in some places, where, not meaning it's as pointing as it sounds, but did you know about it? Where were the other legislators? Where were the other representatives? Where were the other lawmakers that represent that great state on this issue before there was a video out there that hit 100 million viewers?
Yeah, well, it's a great question, Joey, because if you go back, you will see reports as early as 2013 when it comes to daycare fraud. But I want to make it clear that it was actually in 2017 and 2018 that a Democrat attorney general by the name of Lori Swanson was actually investigating and prosecuting Somali daycare fraud. Ms. Swanson ran for the Democrat nomination for governor that year. Guess what? She lost to a guy named Tim Walz, and she was replaced by someone named Keith Ellison. Keith Ellison, upon taking the office of Attorney General, made an internal policy that there will be no further investigations without his express approval. Joey, there hasn't been an investigation since, not until the U.S. Attorney's Office started going after the Feeding Our Future scandal. And for anybody out there who's wondering, well, what were you guys doing? We've been trying to sound the alarm for years, and I thanked President Trump, because it wasn't until President Trump did a truth on a Friday night that called out all of this fraud. The Twin Cities media is complicit in this as well, and because they hate Donald Trump so much, he was genius. Our president was genius by drawing them into a fight that they didn't even realize they were getting into. And since then, the gloves have been off. People are starting to realize just how corrupt not only Tim Walz, but Keith Ellison and the rest of this administration have been over the last 7 years.
Congressman, it's Alicia Acuna. Good to see you. Thank you for being here. I want to continue on this line about the massive Somali fraud scandal gripping your state. You are set to introduce the Scam Act on Tuesday, which will create a path to strip citizenship from naturalized Americans convicted of fraud, terrorist ties, or aggravated felonies within the last 10 years. Congressman, what else can you tell us about your legislation, and do you expect it to pass this year?
Yeah, I do expect it to move through the House. We'll have to see if Democrats, common sense Democrats, still exist in the Senate. Literally what this is, Alicia, is we're expanding and clarifying existing law to include anyone who comes to this country and defrauds the generosity of Americans and our government. And in this case, you know, the Feeding Our Future scandal is one of the many in Minnesota, but that's the largest pandemic fraud case in the country. It was $250 million. Over 90 people were charged, and Alicia, 85 of them are from the Somali community. If you come to this country, and I understand that in Somalia you got to lie, cheat, and steal just to survive, but if you come to this country and you continue to lie, cheat, and steal, you should not be allowed to maintain your citizenship. You should be denaturalized and shipped back to where you came from. And by the way, that would include marriage fraud.
Congressman David Webb here. Good to see you again. Good to talk to you. Let's go a little bit further on this for clarity on the Scam Act as you're about to introduce it and what already exists under immigration and naturalization law in U.S. federal code. There already is a denaturalization, a process, several areas that can lead to denaturalization. So what does the Scam Act do in conjunction with or in some way working with already existing code?
Well, that's why I said, David, it expands on that law that you're referring to, and it clarifies. And when I say it expands to all types of fraud, and it clarifies that it doesn't matter how you get your citizenship. You know, if it was a program of accelerated citizenship because you came in under the refugee resettlement program, it doesn't matter. And you should, if you commit fraud, if you lie, cheat, and steal from the generous American public, this law would just provide that is a basis to denaturalize, take away your citizenship, and ship you back. And part of this is because I've got a representative in Minnesota, Ilhan Omar, who likes to go on national programs and play the victim, yet the same representative goes to the University of Minnesota campus and in reality encourages violence against Jewish students. And she says, hey, we're citizens, there's nothing you can do about it. Well, guess what? There is something that we should be able to do about it. You should not be allowed to come to this country, take advantage of the generosity of Americans and the American government, and get away with it. If you commit fraud, you should be denaturalized and shipped back.
House Majority Whip Tom Emmer, I'm glad that you said that marriage fraud is included in that. We're all waiting for that one to be busted wide open. Thanks so much for joining us tonight.
Thanks a lot for coming on.
Thanks, guys.
All right, David, I want to go to you. I'm happy about the Scam Act. I'm happy that you brought up in conjunction. You know, I'm glad that they're expanding it. Listen, they say that diversity is our strength. Well, in some cases, in the case of Minnesota, it doesn't feel that way. Do you think that this is going to make a big difference? Do you think it's got any chance, any legs of actually getting us somewhere?
What I've seen so far in the Scam Act, and if he's talking about expanding the scope, I would question if it could have been done through the regulatory process at I.C.E, but law is the better way to go. That is the role of Congress. So I'll give him credit for doing that. You know, it's funny you mentioned the marriage fraud. Obviously, that's been brought up a number of times when it comes to Ilhan Omar. And whoever it is, and when you look into marriage fraud as a problem in immigration, it does happen, and it's not just limited to Somali, in some form, refugees or anyone or someone who seeks to come here through the LPR, the legal permanent residency process. They do need to look into that.
Yeah,
It's a big problem.
The one person I know that did it was a Canadian. I mean, it happens across the board, but it's a loophole is what it is.
The Canadian marrying her brother?
A Canadian marrying an American just to be a citizen.
But not a sibling.
No,
Not a sibling.
no, not a
Okay.
sibling.
Just wanted to clarify, Joe. I didn't know if you saw that case. It feels like a rare one. You know, listen, I have been on social media. I've been a little bit rough on Congressman Emmer because there was a time when he was talking about the strength of the Somali community and working with Keith Ellison on some things. And I think, you know, maybe he'd like us not to talk so much about that. But to, you know, our question that you asked, like, did it take a 23-year-old with a camera to really bust this open? I feel like I'm glad it did, but it feels like a lot of people are asleep at the wheel.
No, you're right. You're right. I mean, if I look at Congressman Emmer's Twitter, which is all I have to go on, because I don't live there, so I don't know everything that he's put out there and everything he's taken. You know, 2015, 2016, 2017, there's a very positive tweet in each of those years about either the Somali caucus or meeting with the ambassador from Somalia. So, I look at that and I say, okay, freshman congressman, maybe he didn't know. Maybe he didn't understand. He seems to be trying to lead in the charge now. I don't know if he's trying to take credit or if he's listening to his constituents and he's realizing this is a problem. But I do think that he was spot on when he said some things like this need a President Trump to be amplified. That 100 million people viewing that video is one thing. President Trump sounding the alarms gets everyone's attention because people are listening, even if it's just to criticize him, and then it becomes a household conversation. I just hope that he becomes a partner with the Trump administration in making something happen of this. Because the one question I probably should have asked him and didn't get a chance to was, tell us about how this has hurt the people of Minnesota. Like, how has this hurt the people of Minnesota?
Well, I mean, can I just throw some numbers in there for everyone listening? $509 million in outlays in 2019 for SNAP benefits. 2023, $1.5 billion.
Yeah.
174% growth year over year. Whether it's Emmer or anyone else, or Republicans in Minnesota, or the federal government, these outlays in part come from the federal government. Somebody should have been watching. Somebody didn't watch. Somebody suppressed that. Somebody didn't pay attention. There were a lot of mistakes here.
A lot of mistakes, Alicia. And, you know, to his point about the hearing with the state legislators that were saying, hey, whistleblowers, they were, you know, intimidated. And then, of course, there was a retaliation. I wanted to ask him as well, and didn't get a chance to, if they ever came to him, to the congressman, to express their concerns. They didn't get a chance to. But what do you make of what Joey said about this it took President Trump to really elevate this? President Trump and Nick Shirley. He's a great reporter, but dang, I don't know. I feel like our Congress people probably should have been on the forefront.
Yeah, it is concerning that that's what it took, like basically these two men. You know, you have the guy on the ground in Minnesota and then the president, and finally everybody's paying attention. I think it's really interesting that this piece of legislation is going to be introduced and it's going to be going through the House this year, the SCAM Act, especially because it broadens things, as you mentioned, and it would alleviate some of the protections, the expanded protections, depending on different paths to citizenship. Because what it could do in terms of the midterms is put Democrats in the position of having to answer of whether or not they are for or against fraud and exactly what they're willing to do about it. And this is actually a gift for Republicans on the campaign trail, because this is something that will follow each and every member of Congress as it makes its way through the House.
Yeah, I'm not too hopeful because some of them vote against the Laken-Riley Act and things of that nature. So it seems that there is no moral floor for some of our friends on the left.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.